Today is unprecedented. Today is historic, and that is not hyperbole, because a lawsuit filed against the NFL by a current head coach alleging racial bias, racially discriminatory practices, that is the thing the NFL never thought that it would get. And that is the thing, if anything, that will spur change. There's a passage in Playmakers, and this is not a gratuitous plug. There is a tie here. It comes out March 15. There's a passage in Playmakers that points out the NFL is never going to change until it faces the credible threat of litigation or actual litigation, and they believe they'll never face it because, and we'll be talking about this over the course of the show, Brian Flores has basically traded in his career with the NFL for this one shot, this very big shot at standing up on behalf of all coaches who have been wronged over the years, all coaches who have been passed over illegally in violation of federal civil rights laws and other applicable laws, and is taking this stand. And I'll be stunned if he ever coaches again in the NFL. Maybe he will. Maybe he will. Maybe that'll be part of the reaction. Maybe somebody will hire him this week to try to take some of the steam out of this. I don't want to be overly cynical, but we saw what they did with Colin Kaepernick. You take them on, and they come after you. And I think their knee-jerk reaction is going to be to come after Brian Flores. But this is amazing. It's astounding. We're going to be breaking it down over the course of the next hour and trying to make it understandable. But the mere fact the NFL is facing this litigation is something the NFL never thought it would have to endure.
Never in a million years, Mike, did I think we'd be talking about anything but Tom Brady leading off this show. But this is historic. It does change everything for the NFL, where 70% of its players are estimated to be black. And right now, there is one black head coach. I am a little stunned that he would file this lawsuit before the Saints and Texans have filled their coaching vacancies. The Dolphins haven't either, but obviously he's not getting that job since he was fired from that job. So he must believe that he wasn't going to get those jobs anyway. And Mike, to me, this puts pressure on those three teams, despite the Texans and the Dolphins having had black head coaches that they fired. But to me, it puts pressure on them right now and maybe changes the way they're going to think through this whole thing. I don't know, but they certainly, to me, seem like they would be under pressure to hire a black head coach right now.
Court of law, it's not going to matter. If I'm representing Brian Flores, I'm going to say this is all window dressing. This is all smokescreen. This is getting your hand caught at the bottom of the cookie jar and yanking your hand out. That's what my response would be. It's meaningless at this point. You've had years, you had decades to do the right thing. And the fact that they would move as quickly as they would to, say, fill half of the remaining vacancies, well, there's 5, so it would have to be at least 3 of the remaining vacancies with black head coaches, would be an obvious pivot away from the way things were going to go. So ideally, you wait for these final 5 jobs to be filled, ideally, but I don't think anything really matters at this point. And maybe by doing it, maybe in a weird sort of way, he's doing a service for 1 or 2 or 3 black head coaches who will get hired now, because from a PR perspective, court of public opinion perspective, this is where the NFL may need to act. It will be meaningless in a court of law. It will have great meaning in the court of public opinion, and it'll go a long way toward creating the sense that these allegations are being taken seriously, or there's nothing to it. Look, 2, 3 black coaches ended up being hired in this cycle, and that's the way that the PR mindset operates sometimes. It's at a very basic, unnuanced level. So he could be doing a favor for some of the coaches out there who have been trying to get hired who just can't.
Yeah, no question about it, Mike. And when you look at the vacancies that are out there, they almost seem like we know who's going to get those. Those teams just haven't decided on that. And that was part of his lawsuit, was the Giants part of it. He knew 3 days, or thought he knew 3 days before that job, before his interview for that job, that they'd already filled the vacancy because of an errant text by Bill Belichick. So he must have felt also that he wasn't a strong or the candidate in Houston or the candidate in New Orleans for this thing. And so he acted for every black head coach out there that has been passed over for these jobs. And this probably will be the one thing that changes everything, Mike. The Rooney Rule, as much as they've tweaked it, they did it again this year. as much as they've tweaked it, it's been the same old this hiring cycle. We've seen nothing new as far as the coaching hires go. We've seen a little bit more in the GM hires, but nothing in the coaching hires to say that these changes have made any inroads at all on teams hiring black head coaches. And this will do it. This is the one thing I think that will change minds around the league, that they will have to look at this seriously and really evaluate how they're hiring head coaches.
And apart from the knee-jerk Kaepernick-style reaction that the league will have, how dare you sue us? How dare you do that? And there are people out there who actually think it's okay to retaliate against someone who has dared to advance his or her rights in a court of law. You're protected against retaliation. It's improper to retaliate. And if it were happening to you, your loved one, child, spouse, brother, cousin, aunt, uncle, nephew, niece, whoever, you would be livid about it. You can't take action against someone. You can't slam the door in someone's face because they dared to exercise their legal rights. It has a chilling effect on people doing what is right. But it'll happen. And another thing that will hurt Brian Flores, the fact that he breached the sacred trust. He violated the code. He got text messages from Bill Belichick. Are you kidding me? The greatest coach in NFL history, a close friend of Brian Flores, the mentor of Brian Flores, and he's going public with these? Unless Bill Belichick knew about it and said, okay, Brian Flores has a problem. And from the standpoint of who will trust him going forward under any set of circumstances. And this is, I'm not saying this is right. This is human nature type stuff. You can't send him a text message. You can't say anything to him because he's shown that when it suits his interests, he will say something about it. Now, what he's doing here, and he invokes some of the great civil rights leaders of the past, and I know that some people will say, oh, who does he think he is? Look. He's trading in his career as an NFL head coach. There's a chance he's not. But he has to go into this process. When he authorizes the filing of that complaint, Charean, he is assuming a very real risk that he will never coach again in the National Football League. And that is a sacrifice. That is a major sacrifice that he's made. Here's his statement. God has gifted me with a special talent to coach the game of football, but the need for change is bigger than my personal goals. In making the decision to file the class action complaint, I understand that I may be risking coaching the game I love and has done so much for my family and me. My sincere hope is that by standing up against systemic racism in the NFL, others will join me to ensure that positive change is made for generations to come. And I'm here to say, I stand with Brian Flores. There is systemic racism in the NFL when it comes to the hiring of coaches. It's there. All you have to do is look at the history of hiring. It can't be that you flip a coin that many times and it comes up white coach. It's impossible. The odds are impossible. I've said this all along. Somebody was texting me. Here, let me. I'm not going to tell you who texted me. Just not that it's anything controversial. Somebody asked me that the details in the complaint are salacious, but is there something there with legal teeth? My response is the case was won the moment it was filed. Here's why. And I've been saying this for years. I think I have. I don't know. I think so. I've probably said it at least once or twice. The evidence is hiding in plain sight. The evidence is every hire that has been made for the past 50 years in the National Football League. Statistically, you can't defend it. Statistically, it's impossible. Statistically, you will have won Powerball multiple times over to have that many coaches, white. Think about it. Start flipping coins. Heads is white, tails is black. How many come up heads and how many come up tails? I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but that's as simple as it gets. Statistically, I mean, he doesn't need smoking guns. He doesn't need salacious text messages. He doesn't need allegations of the likes that are lurking in the complaint. All he needs to say is, here's every head coaching hire that's been made for the last 50 years, and here's check white one corner, check black the other corner, and it's going to be obvious once we see all those numbers in front of us in stark, undeniable, factual truth, Charean.
Yeah, I mean, you just point to Mike Tomlin right now. He's the lone guy left, black head coach in this league after with 5 openings still left. But after the firings that we've had and the hirings that we've had, we're left with 1, and that's just not good enough. Again, in a league that is 70% black players, you just can't have that. And you're right, there is racism because there would be more black head coaches. And don't tell me there's none that are qualified. We all know they are. Mike Tomlin's been one of the most successful head coaches in this league. I would argue that Brian Flores was one of the best candidates in this cycle after the Dolphins hired him. But yet he's probably, well, now he's not going to get a job, but he probably wasn't going to get one before this lawsuit anyway, which is why he filed the lawsuit. But there are just so many teams and so many people in this lawsuit that just come off looking really, really bad, Mike. Probably staying
Remember,
forever.
These are allegations.
The Giants, the Broncos,
Remember.
The Dolphins. Allegations.
Right. Remember,
but
allegations.
People are going to remember. People are going to remember this, Mike. They're not going to remember how it all plays out. They're going to read this and they're going to say, "Man, they can't come off looking bad in all of this." And they do. All these teams come off looking bad. But you can look at all 32 teams, and that's who he names. All 32 teams in this league, which is what it needs to be, because none of these teams have done right by the Rooney Rule. I would argue, except for possibly the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have had Mike Tomlin employed forever and a day.
And it is a class action, meaning that he represents both himself and all similarly situated individuals, other black coaches who have been the victim of systemic racism through the hiring practices of the National Football League over whatever period of time would fall within the applicable statute of limitations. I haven't researched that. A continuing violation potentially delays the running of the statute. It would be normally a 2-year thing. There may be, and more years will be relevant to proving it. The question is, how many years do you go back in determining how many individuals potentially fall within the class? That's going to be the key. Does it go back 50 years? Is it an unbroken chain? You could argue that it is. And remember, the Rooney Rule was adopted 20 years ago because of the threat of litigation from the late Johnny Cochran and Cyrus Mary. They were going to find someone to file the lawsuit. I thought they were going to have a hard time doing it, but that's what they were going to do. And here comes Brian Flores, and he does it. And the fact that this thing is so long and detailed, it tells me that probably the moment he was fired, he began looking for a lawyer while also searching for a job, looking for a lawyer to take this on. You don't put a lawsuit like this together overnight. This doesn't happen when Brian Daboll gets hired on Friday night by the Giants. This is something that has been brewing for a while, at least since the day that he was fired, and possibly before that. This is possibly something he's been thinking about in the event he ever is fired. Maybe he sensed it was coming from the Dolphins. Who knows? But this really is stunning.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.